Out of all the numbered Gran Turismo games to bless our hearts, the first game by far garnishes the least discussion. I could see why. It doesn't have as much content, the graphics hasn't aged well compared to its successors, and it can be seen by many people as sort of a test beta for what this series will eventually offer, given just how much bigger Gran Turismo 2 is by comparison. However, I love it so much. It's likely the first game I played, and I poured just as much dedicated hours into it as all the others. Even today, it's one of my favorites, maybe even my absolute favorite Gran Turismo game. And in this video, I want to share 10 important and interesting facts regarding this game, starting with the basic info and moving towards some cool trivia. It's rather shocking to see how many people get basic facts about Gran Turismo 1 wrong, and as a massive fan myself, I want to correct those facts once and for all. Let's get started. 1. Because of how large the vehicle selection of Gran Turismo has become over the years, spanning multiple countries across the globe, some would assume that that's the standard for all games in this series. That's not the case. Not only does Gran Turismo 1 have the least amount of cars in the series, but it only comprises of 3 countries: Japan, America, and Britain. Even then, however, the game is dominated by Japanese cars. I consider Gran Turismo 1 a JDM-focused car game with a slice of respectable domestic cars to boot. I would also put Automotive in that same category. You got the big dogs like the Toyota Supra and Celica, Nissan Skyline and Silvia, Honda or Acura, NSX and Integra, Mitsubishi GTO and FTO, Subaru Impreza and Legacy, and a Mazda Roadster and RX-7. But also you got some obscure options like the Lantis Type R, Prelude, Pulsar, or Galant. Toyota in particular has a good variety of models. They got the Chaser, Soarer, Starlet, Glanza, even the— Are you f***ing— So yeah, Gran Turismo 1 is riddled with Nihon no Kikai, but the other 2 countries still have just as exciting, if not better options. TVR has got the Subaru and Griffith, Aston Martin has the DB7, Chevrolet the 4th gen Corvette and Camaro, and of course, Dodge has the almighty Viper, and a Copperhead concept interestingly. In total, there are about 140 cars in the game, not including racing modifications. Sounds small by today's standards, but keep in mind that this was back in 1998, and this amount of cars at the time was unheard of before. 2. Just like how Gran Turismo 1 has a small but unique car selection compared to its successors, the same could be said for the circuit selection. Excluding reverse tracks, there are 11 tracks total, all of which are fictional. No need for Laguna Seca, kids! We are perfectly capable with High Speed Ring, Autumn Ring Mini, Clubland Stage Route 5, Grand Valley East, Trial Mountain, Deep Forest, Test Course, Autumn Ring, Special Stage Route 5, Grand Valley Speedway, and Special Stage Route 11 in this bad boy. I personally adore these original 11, and I'll explain why in a later video. But yeah, Apricot Hill, Midfield Raceway, Seattle, and all others debuted later in this series. Some immediately after, others a couple of years down the line. 3. Everyone knows what simulation and arcade mode set out to accomplish, but what many people don't know is that Gran Turismo 1's iteration of arcade mode is different to simulation in much more ways than you might expect. Generally, arcade is set for just a quick race against the AI opponents or your nearby friends. What separates Gran Turismo 1's version is that it can be easily treated as a separate game altogether. Think of it like comparing Super Smash Bros. Classic mode to the big adventurous modes of that title, like Subspace Emissary or World of Light. That is what arcade mode does here. You start off initially with only 4 tracks at your leisure and 6 manufacturers to choose from. To unlock more tracks and cars, you need to win races at every event in 3 classes, C, B, and A, from slowest to fastest. And to collect everything in arcade mode, you need to do the same for all tracks at the highest difficulty. So even though there's only 8 tracks total in single race, you technically need to win 24 races total. which is a pretty good amount for a mode this small. In fact, that's more required races than Gran Turismo 2's arcade mode, with a lot more variety to boot. But that's not all, because the driving fixes are massively different compared to simulation. In this already fast game, the cars here are much faster. They give actual race cars from the same game a run for their money. Just look! So, why did they do this and never do it again? Well, from what I've seen, the developers thought that the domestic market for Gran Turismo would find career mode rather long and boring, and so they decided to include arcade as well as make it different from the Japanese version by changing physics and including 2 new cars, the NB-shaped UNOS Roadster and a C2 Corvette 427 Stingray, to better appeal to the wide audience. Although nowadays that would be laughable to think about, I wouldn't be surprised if this iteration of arcade mode also boosted the popularity enough to make it the best-selling game on the PlayStation. Honestly, some days I actually prefer arcade mode to simulation, just because of how damn fun it can be. 4. We're slowly moving to the more interesting facts now. The reason why I want to talk about the music of GT1 isn't just because I love it so much, but it has unique properties compared to the other GT games. The soundtrack for both the Japanese and domestic versions are totally different. Japan has a much more relaxing and cafe vibe with its soundtrack, pretty much like GT2. Some of them were even remixed in said game and Gran Turismo 4, such as these. This vibe even extends to the racing music. Yeah, you won't find any of this in the American and European versions. Ours are something you find in a disco club filled with booze and marijuana. Not necessarily as polished as the Japanese version, as it uses a lot more samples, but it's far more addicting in my opinion. Also, the race soundtrack is licensed, most of them containing instrumental versions of the songs from heavy metal band Cubante. Cubant? Let me know in the comments what that's pronounced. This, like any cultural divide, has mixed opinions to which soundtrack is better. But god damn it, I love both soundtracks to death. 5. Yet another case of a unique twist compared to the other GT games. With the exception of the Mazda RX-7 and Dodge Viper, all the cars you drive in these tests are white. The Demio, the Silvia, the Supra, the Griffith, all of them have this bland testing vibe. Like the people in universe wanted the cheapest possible option in case you crash those cars, which I think is a neat touch. Also keeping with the country theme, all the cars in B and A are Japanese. However, only 2 cars are used in IA, the British TVR Griffith and the American Dodge Viper GTS, each 4 times. Pretty much all the tests here can be brutal challenges to complete, just like most early Gran Turismo games. With one notable exception. A7 pits you in a Subaru Impreza in a closed oval surrounded by tires on the opening straight in Grand Valley. You're just driving in circles. And getting the gold here is shockingly much easier than all the other tests. I would be surprised if 4-year-olds can achieve it. It's this easy because it's intended to teach you how to power slide. Obviously, that failed. In my opinion, it should have been replaced by the middle section of Special Stage Route 11. You already know why. 6. This is going to be a very short one. Because there's no way to drive through the interior, the best way to drive in Gran Turismo 1 is the chase camera. And shockingly enough, there's tons of different options. You can choose how far and loose your car will be. Here's a side-by-side comparison for all possible options. Seven. I already reviewed this car back in 2019. I pretty much stated everything I wanted to say about that car in the review. Except for one thing, which I found much later. I wanted to replicate this livery on a Toyota Crown Athlete in Gran Turismo Sport since both that and the regular Chaser are pretty similar in their design. You see this decal? Crazy as this sounds, I was stuck on this specific decal for so long because I didn't know what some of the letters were, and I couldn't find any sponsors of that name. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't a brand at all. It was actually an Easter egg to one of the artists of Gran Turismo 1, Nodoka Kinsho. Kinda makes the lack of this car in Gran Turismo 2 more depressing, despite how terrible it is. Oh, and update, remember this line back in the original review? Heck, I haven't tested it, but I wouldn't be surprised if the fully tuned Chaser Tour V was faster around the track. That was the case with the fully tuned Mitsubishi GTO and Dodge Viper GTS. I can now confirm that is indeed the case. The regular Chaser Tour V fully tuned is indeed faster and better. 8. Now surprisingly for a first game of this series, Gran Turismo 1 is one of the more polished games in the franchise if we're talking lack of glitches. When driving normally around the track, there's really no reason to be searching for glitches when the walls push you back and you slow down heavily when driving on the grass. The only really noticeable flaw is a couple of clipping issues when colliding with the AI, but that's pretty much it. There isn't even a top speed glitch like most GT games. Or is there? I'll let Francisco do the action here.
What is... There we go. It's meme time.
Yep, that's actually a thing.
Oh my god, I'm still maintaining it. How?
In a Japanese version of Gran Turismo 1, by entering a race with a 4-wheel drive car, you can drive into a wall, and when done correctly, you'll be flying across the track at insane speeds. If done right, you could be driving at around the speed of sound. I think this looks way cooler than the 2,147,483,647 miles per hour glitch in Gran Turismo 3. Even though that looks sick as well. 9. While Initial D fans was responsible for boosting the popularity of the 8086, RX-7, and Lancer Evo, same with Fast and Furious with its Skyline, Integra, Supra, and Eclipse, Gran Turismo 1 was pretty much responsible for raising popularity for everything else, in the JDM scene that is. The GTO and R33 Skyline are perfect examples. While most JDM fans don't have much fondness for either car, Gran Turismo 1 fans remember these for their insanely overpowered dominance in career mode. both posting well over 900 horsepower fully tuned, and having all-wheel drive grip. It's not uncommon to see Gran Turismo WANG related comments on any 3000 GT Gran Turismo video. This game was also responsible for starting the popularity of the Toyota Supra, the Mark III for being the best starter car in the game, and the Mark IV for being among the fastest, though obviously Fast and Furious stole all of that credibility. Gamers were introduced to the Subaru STI thanks to this game. The Corvette Grand Sport became a well-loved Chevrolet at the time. Some obscure cars still have their cult following like the Chaser, FTO, S14 Silvia, and Atlantis Type R. And yes, along with many others, I will fully admit that one of the primary reasons why the Dodge Viper is my favorite car is thanks to this game. And as for TVR? 10! Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64 introduced a character virtually nobody has heard of before. And you may have heard of him for one reason or another. Ness. Yep, that's where my username came from. After that, however, he became a fan favorite, and eventually his home game, Earthbound, got ported over to the Virtual Console and SNES Mini. Why am I bringing this up? Because I believe TVR served the same underlying legacy as Ness. At the time, TVR was very obscure in the car scene. Aston Martin, Jaguar, McLaren, Land Rover, and Lotus were all big names in the British car scene, but TVR just couldn't keep up with the big dogs. Until Gran Turismo 1. It's a rather shocking choice all things considered to put TVR in the game instead of Lotus or Jaguar, and to include the Subaru race car as one of the best cars in the game no less. But it certainly paid off, as TVR is now a pretty well known name in the car industry, for making insanely weird but addicting and old school machines. It is rumored that it was thanks to Gran Turismo 1 that sales of TVR grew as a result. Man, that was a long one. I hope you enjoyed this lovely discussion about this incredible game. I think more Gran Turismo fans should play this game. At worst, have it in their collection or emulate it. It doesn't matter that there's so much stuff to do in that game as the others. It's what you do in GT that makes it very special. That's gonna be it for now. This is Ness Pajamas saying, play Gran Turismo 1. And fluffy pillows.